إذن نبدأ حلقة النقاش الأخيرة لهذا اليوم بعنوان الاتجاهات الحديثة في ريادة الأعمال وتحفيز التعاون بين الجامعات والقطاع الخاص لتحقيق رؤية 2030. وسيرأس الجلسة سعادة الدكتور خليل الشافعي المدير التنفيذي لمركز أرامكو السعودية لريادة الأعمال واعد، ومشاركين الذين معهم في هذه الجلسة. فلتفضلوا.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. And with me, first thing will come our panelists. We start with the Princess Haifa bin Mohammed Al Saud, and then Dr. Mohammed Shaya from Majma' University, and Ahmed Amoudi from SWIC, and Christopher Noble. And Christopher, you are retired now, right? Or we are sentenced?
Worked a lot.
You work a lot, okay. Okay. And then Hatan Ahmed, he is with CAUS, and Dr. Cameron McCoy with Lehigh University. So we're going to start our discussion with the first thing. I'd like to ask Princess Princess Haifa. Recently, we have a major drive for expanding the roles of women and contribution in the development of the Saudi economy. So how are we doing so far? And what's next?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I think the changes that have been happening for women within the economy and within the workforce environment in Saudi Arabia in general has been visible. We're seeing a lot more women enter the workforce. We're seeing a lot more entrepreneurs that are females. And we're seeing a lot more focus to enable and empower those women from different government entities, not just specific sectors. From our perspective, as the General Sports Authority, we are looking on engaging and empowering everyone and all different members of the society. We're looking at diversity and inclusion, so we're not taking certain segments of the society and focusing on them, because we believe that there is opportunity for development across the board and looking at the entire landscape.
So do we have like KPI, key performance, like what you want to achieve at what period?
I think SMEA has a bunch of KPIs on what they need to achieve within entrepreneurship and empowering entrepreneurs in general. For us, we're looking at having, we have specific KPIs for the contribution of the sports economy to the general and overall GDP of the country for 2030, and hopefully we're working on achieving that.
Okay, thank you. Next, this is kind of might be a little bit tough question, Mohammed, because Mohammed is last minute substitute. So his boss basically sacrificed him today. So Einstein said you cannot solve a problem at the same state of mind that created it. So can you tell us what Saudi universities are doing differently to bridge the gap between the academia and the marketplace?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I would like to welcome all of you. أنا حقيقة أرحب فيكم في هذا الحلقة النقاشية، وبلغكم اعتذار الدكتور خالد بن سعد المقرن على الحضور نتيجة ظرف طارئ حصل في آخر ساعة، لكن إن شاء الله نكون يعني في هذا المكان نحاول نوفي في قدر المستطاع في الإجابة على الأسئلة في هذه الورشة. الحقيقة الجامعات السعودية أنا ودي دائما أقول يعني يجب المقارنة أن تكون عادلة، وننظر دائما إلى الظروف اللي نمت فيها المملكة العربية السعودية على أساس أن نفهم السؤال اللي هي قضية فعلا وين المسافة بين الجامعات والقطاع الخاص أو الماركتينج. الجامعات في المملكة العربية السعودية أنشئت في البداية بسبب طبعا اللي هو التعليمي، فكانت حقيقة هي امتداد للمرحلة المتوسطة والثانوية والجامعة، وكان الهدف منها هو تعليمي بحت، لأنه حقيقة البحث العلمي هو مجال أعلى من قضية التعليم. المملكة في ذلك الوقت كانت أحوج إلى قضية التعليم قبل البحث العلمي. لذلك نجد على سبيل المثال أن نسبة الأمية كانت قبل 40 سنة غير نسبة الأمية قبل 30 غير قبل 20 قبل 10 سنوات. نجد أن نسبة الأمية الآن تكاد تنعدم في المملكة. لذلك حقيقة أهدافها كانت في البداية هي تعليمية، بعد ذلك أتت إلى أهداف تنموية وهي افتتاح أقسام علمية مثل الهندسة والطب وطب الأسنان والصيدلة، وكان الهدف منها إحلال المواطنين يقودوا العمل الحكومي في البداية قبل القطاع الخاص. مع رؤية 2030 ومع كثرة الجامعات السعودية الآن بلغ عددها 28 universities، يعني تغيرت خطة السعودية يعني من خلال 2030 فيجن إلى أنه كيف نحول الجامعات إلى أنها تكون تخدم القطاع الخاص وتحاول سد هذه الفجوة بينه وبين القطاع الخاص. لذلك أنا أتوقع بأن إقامة مثل هذا الملتقى هذا الهدف منه أساساً، يعني كيف أننا نقضي على المسافة أو الجاب بين الجامعة والقطاع الخاص، لأنه لا يمكن أن يعمل في القطاع الخاص شخص غير لم يتخرج من الجامعة. أنا ما أتصور أن في أحد ممكن يعمل في شركة وهو ما يحمل مثلا الكمبيوتر ساينس مثلا على سبيل المثال أو أي تخصص علمي تحتاجه الشركات. يعني الشركات دائما تميل إلى أنه أوكي يعني على أقل تقدير يكون لديك بكالوريوس، لكن لذلك حقيقة نجد أن معظم من يقود القطاع التكنولوجي في العالم هم خريجين بكالوريوس، وبعد ذلك قد يأتون المرحلة الثانية مرحلة الماجستير. لذا الجامعات في البداية أتوقع بأنه يجب حتى تملأ الجاب هذا أن تكون مخرجاتها في البكالوريوس متوافقة مع سوق العمل. اللي قاعد يصير الآن في الألفية الأخيرة هذه أن التغير تشينج فيري فاست. يعني احنا كنا أول يعني نسمع عن الكمبيوتر، ما كنا نتصور أنه الآن أصبح الآيفون هو كل شيء، أصبح كمبيوتر الآن موجود في خلال سنوات وجيزة. الإشكال اللي يواجه الجامعات حقيقة أنها حتى تغير البلان في الاستادي يعني تحتاج وقت، ولذلك تجد نفسها عندما تبدأ في خطة دراسية قد لا يتخرج الآن الدفعة الأخيرة إلا حدثت تغيرات كثيرة في مجال العلم. لذا نتوقع يعني أكبر تحدي يواجه الجامعات هي فعلا سرعة التغيير خاصة في المقررات بما يتوافق مع التغير السريع في التكنولوجيا ووسائل الاتصال. أنا يعني بحكم تخصصي السوسيولوجي يعني علم الاجتماع، فدائما أنظر من زاوية اجتماعية أكثر من زاوية أخرى، وأقول يعني مقارنة المجتمع السعودي حتى لما ذكرت سمو الأميرة عن قضية السبورت والسبورت، الجامعات الآن بدأت تتغير. يعني أول كنا نتكلم قبل 40 سنة أو 50 سنة على أن التعليم الفتيات فيه مشكلة، وكنا نتكلم قبل 10 سنوات أنه لما دمجت وزارة التعليم مع رئاسة تعليم البنات أصبحت مشكلة في المجتمع. يعني لا ننسى هذا التاريخ وقريب. لما دمجت المقررات بين الجنسين أصبحت فيه يعني في المجتمع إشكالية. لما أتينا الآن لقضية يعني أنه ندمج بين قضية التعليم أصبحت الآن في إشكال. ولذلك أنا أقول يعني فهم التاريخ يخلينا لا نستعجل على التغيير المستقبلي. نعم نسير فيه، لكن لا نطلب تغييرات سريعة قد تؤدي إلى خلق يعني إشكاليات، لأنه أحيانا البعد الثقافي يحتاج نضج. أنا مع يعني الجامعات الآن يعني على سبيل المثال سوق العمل الآن بدأ يميل كان ذكرت سمو الأميرة قضية السبورت والسبورت. الآن الجامعات عندها توجه فتح تعليم التربية الرياضية للفتيات. معظم الجامعات السعودية الآن أعتقد ليس لديها هذا القسم حاليا. الآن بدأنا احنا في جامعة المجمع على سبيل المثال يعني نميل لهذا الجانب. أيضا الأندية النسائية كانت في المملكة غير مسموح بها إلى وقت قريب. الآن أصبحت الأندية الرياضية النسائية مسموح بها. في الجامعة يجب أنها تتغير بما يتوافق مع سوق العمل حتى القطاع الخاص، لأنه أحيااً المدربين أو غيره يحتاجون إلى عنصر نسائي. فأنا بأذكر يعني أساساً أن يعني الجاب بين المملكة العربية السعودية يعني تحديداً الجامعات السعودية نعم تحتاج وقت، وأيضاً تختلف في الجامعات. التحدي اللي كان يواجه الجامعات أن الجامعات أنشئت لسبب تعليمي بما فيها جامعة الملك سعود وبما فيها جامعات الناشئة مثل جامعة المجمع. لذلك نجد فيها يعني تخصصات كثيرة، لكن نجد أن الجامعات في السعودية اللي تخصصت في مجال معين هي محدودة. مثل جامعة البترول والمعادن، سر نجاح هذه الجامعة حقيقة لأنها ركزت في اريا معينة وهي اريا محددة، وهي ما يتعلق في هندسة البترول وهندسة النفط. ولذا حتى القطاع الخاص وجد فيها أن فعلا يعني ركزت على جانب وأنه ممكن يستفيد منها. بينما بقية الجامعات يعني إذا استبعدنا جامعة الملك سعود نجد أنها يعني أصبحت تعليمية بحتة، بل أنها كانت يعني غالبا ما تحقق هدف سياسي أكثر من كونه هدف اقتصادي. نعرف أنه كان الهدف يعني استيعاب الشباب، عندنا نمو في الشباب، وبالتالي كانت يعني دائما تأتي التوجيهات بأن الشباب إذا ما قبلوا في الجامعة أين سوف يذهبون؟ قد يكونون عبء على أمني على المجتمع، ولذلك يجب على الجامعات أن تقوم. أنا أذكر إلى وقت قريب كانت يعني الجامعات تعلن نسبة المقاعد الشاغرة التي لديها، لأنه كان التوجيه صريح أكثر من كونها تفكر بسوق العمل. لذلك أنا أقول بدأنا مع الرؤية، وأنا حقيقة من الناس المؤمنين في الرؤية بأنها تقود المجتمع الاتجاه الصحيح. بدأت العملية يعني واضحة بأنه يجب أن يكون مجتمع تنموي، ويجب أن يكون حيوي، ويجب أن يكون متوافق مع المجتمعات الأخرى، وأي مشكلة أخرى يعني تنتج يجب أن تعالج بالطريقة الصحيحة ولا نستخدم الإسبرين. لذلك أنا أتوقع بأن الجامعات الآن بدأت حتى مع إعادة هيكلة الجامعات الجديدة، أو مع نظام الجامعات الجديد، أصبحت الجامعات يجب أن تتوافق مع سوق العمل. أيضا سوق العمل يجب أن يكون يعني لديه ثقة في الجامعات. أتوقع أنه هذه تحتاج فترة طويلة حتى تكون الثقة، لأنه الآن نجد أن التنافس بين الجامعات السعودية أو الجامعات هو الفرق كبير جدا، لكن أتوقع بأن الجامعات إذا ركزت على تخصصات معينة سوف تستطيع أن تملأ هذا الفراغ. يعني أنا ممكن أختصر يعني في هذا الإجابة أن الجامعات نعم يجب أن تسير في هذا الصعيد، لكن يجب أن لا نقسو على الجامعات لأن التغيير يحتاج منها وقت، لكن يجب أن نسرع في هذا الأمر.
شكرا. ردك عليه.
Okay, sure. Bismillah. First of all, I would like to welcome the audience and our moderators, and thank you for giving a chance to us to speak in this stage. First of all, we would like to know that the partnership between the academia and the industry are not new. It is already started in early 20th century between MIT and one of the leading company for the oil industry, and they have solved their problem, and they have changed also the technology at that time. For Saudi Arabia, in order to fill the gap between the university and the academia, there's two issues. The first issue, the university itself, and the second is the industries. If we look to the universities, they have to change their philosophy of research. They have to focus on the practical research rather than the theoretical research, which usually shelved. Second, they should move a step forward than the market industry needed by establishing the market research directions. For example, business schools, office technology transfer, increasing the partnership with industry, and addressing the market needs. And also the third thing that I believe, they have to design the training and the co-op for the engineer with the industrial field. They have to addressing the big issue or the drawback that's faced by the industry in order to precipitate in solving this issue. I believe if they give a chance to the students, they will do a lot of work for them. On the other hand, if we go to the industry actually, they have to identify the future need and exploring the opportunity to the academia in order to have a great input to the research program for both of them. And also, they have to, the university, the industry, they have to empower the transparency with academia by exploring the shortcomings that they are facing to the academia in order to have sort out their drawbacks. And lastly, I believe that they have to find, both of them, they have to work together to see what is the fund allocation for the research projects. That's in brief. Thank you.
So, I mean, for the water industry. what we're doing there as universities, are they really helping you? Are they coming up with new technologies? Because like recently when I read, we have the biggest desalination plants in the world. But then I read that Israel is way ahead of us in the technology. So where we're coming short? Why we don't have that technology since we have the industry?
Okay, great. Actually, as
Where
you
did the universities fail?
okay, I will explore this to you and to the audience. As you know, Saline Water Conversion Corporation have a research institute, and this considered is the main arm for the SWIC in order to help the plants to running safely and also to improve the performance of the plants and also to reduce the cost and increase the productions. As we heard lastly, we have been increased the production by the research center from 3.5 million meter cube per day to about 5 million when we work together with the plants, the D3 or the R&D work with the plants. What is the university? Actually, we have collaboration with the university. Okay, we have a collaboration with KAUST, with King Abdulaziz University, with CAST, with KVPM, and King Saud as well. But as you know, there's a shortage actually in the researcher, specifically in the field of desalination. We have our people, we have our researchers. Okay, they are doing the research for the plant, sometimes with a cooperation with the university. For example, now we are working with KFUPM for having a green chemicals for the anti-corrosions. And also now we have collaboration with the CAST, King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology. For our technology, as you know that we have several patents. One of them is tri-hybrid, which is now is going to be commercialized in Yumba within less than a year. And this is actually is a breakthrough that the production by this technology has increased by 100% and fuel consumption reduced by 50%. This is where we're our R&D staff working with the Sasakora company. But now we are working with the CAST to have tetrahybrid, actually, that they have a new DIRCO process that will combine with a trihybrid to become tetrahybrid in order to increase the efficiency of the plants. Rather than having 100% production increase, it will have 200% production increase at the same fuel consumption. That will be a dramatic change in the philosophy of desalination. And we are now working with the CAST. Besides that, there is another collaboration also with the CAST for a specific area for bioactivity. In the technology, SWIC R&D is the leading research institute in the MENA area. And now we are planning also to be toward to the global area, not limited to MENA area. Since now we have got approval from our government for 25 top researchers in the world. Now we are having at least we have grabbed about 10 top nations in the world now. They will be joining us within a few months. Actually, with our staff and with the top-notch scientists, with the collaboration with our university, we will believe that will change dramatically the philosophy of desalination, rather than focusing in the conventional or traditional one, the thermal one or the reverse osmosis. No, we are now beyond this box with our staff and also with our universities.
Okay, thank you.
This is briefly.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Christopher, your take on this.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to the organizers of this incredible conference. I found the opening ceremony on Monday night to be very inspiring. I watched right afterwards the 60 Minutes interview of the Crown Prince, and I have to say it's an exciting time to be a young man or a young woman in the kingdom right now. I really am excited about what you are all trying to do here. And one of the things that appealed to me very much, working for a university where we try to express ourselves very clearly and very openly and very precisely about what we do was to go to the website of Vision 2030, which is an amazing website. The amount of information and the planning and how you are going about transforming the economy and the society was very inspiring. So I wish you all great luck. This is my first visit to Saudi Arabia, and wow, if it's always like this, it's an incredible place. I would like to address a particular aspect of the question that you ask about bridges, because this is a topic that has been talked about quite a lot in this conference. And so I wanted to introduce maybe an additional element that can contribute to answering the question. And this is a new activity, I think, but one that has a lot of potential, where universities can be a bridge between large companies and startup companies. You know, traditionally, large companies and startup companies operate quite independently until maybe a large company will acquire a small company. And sometimes the acquisition will dissolve the magic of the small company. And many large companies, including Aramco, are moving beyond that to a situation where they create strategic partnerships with small companies for mutual benefit without acquiring the small company. I think this has an enormous potential to transform the culture of large companies and also help small companies grow and prosper and maintain their independence. So I would like, rather than talking in generalities, to tell you a story of an example of that. We appreciate that MIT, we have a wonderful relationship with Saudi Aramco. We've been a research partner for many years. We work with all the major oil companies. And one, which is a story that I'm going to tell you in a couple of minutes, it's a short story, is a French company, Total, also a multinational oil company, that sponsored research at MIT on battery technology because they anticipated the need for storage batteries in their electrical distribution networks. The research went very well, and towards the end of the research team at the university came to us and said, we would like to spin out a startup company to commercialize these batteries. And so we went to Total, who was the sponsor of the research, and we said, the research team would like to spin out a startup company. How about if you, Total, become shareholders in this startup company without acquiring it and become a strategic partner so that the startup company can develop batteries that Total can use in your own business, and the startup company will also develop batteries that they will commercialize themselves. And this has been an extremely successful experience for the university, for the large company, and for the startup company. So this is what I would like to contribute to this idea of bridges, that the university can be a bridge between large companies and small companies, startup companies in the kingdom for mutual benefit.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So at KAUST, if you look at KAUST's mission, we have three main components built into the mission of KAUST. First of all, we want to produce high-quality graduates holding master's and PhD degrees that are ready to contribute significantly to the local market and for the corporate employments or academic endeavor. And the second component, we're driven to create high-quality research outputs, and we're proud to be highly cited per capita or per faculty member in KAUST. But the third element that is relevant to your question, Khalil, is the economic development component that is embedded at the mission of KAUST. And using that, it's built in within KAUST structure, and we leverage that it's been young university, so it was quite designed this way to serve this purpose, where we have a complete structure that serves innovation and economic development that is headed by a vice president. And in that component, we have the Technology Transfer Office, We do have the Entrepreneurship Center where I'm heading, and also we have the Innovation Fund, which is a venture fund that invests into startups, and one key component, which is an industrial engagement office, or مكتب استشارات صناعية. So with this full functional component, at the Entrepreneurship Center, where I'm currently heading, basically we have three main strategic intents. First of all, we want to empower the student population with an entrepreneurial and innovative mindset. And with this, we will make them ready for whatever career endeavor they wanted to go for, whether it's academic pursuit or building a startup or going for a corporate career that they wanted to go. So we wanted to make sure that they're ready for the corporate recruits in order to have them empowered with this way of thinking. And we do this, that we give in elective courses for credits for the students to take it during those during their time while they're doing their degree, because we believe that entrepreneurship and innovation are let's say the basics of the modern economic development building into this. So wherever if they are at their corporate setting and they see an opportunity sitting at their desk, or they're in an academic lab and they see an opportunity sitting at their lab bench, they can pick it up, build a business case, and then defend it, convince the senior management, decision makers, in order to pursue it, take it forward, and execute it. So at KAUST Entrepreneurship Center, which is one component of a multifunction organization that we're operating to foster and promote innovation and economic development, we have three main strategic interests. We wanted to empower them with an entrepreneurial mindset. And the second pillar is that we want to build and produce very high quality startups. And we do this through two flagship programs, accelerator programs, in partnership with the private sector and also with the public sector. So we're running 9/10 Accelerator in partnership with Takamul Holding Company, which is part of Ministry of Labor, and also we're running Taqaddam Startup Accelerator, which is in partnership with Saudi British Bank. And Taqaddam, basically, it's an accelerator, which is 6 months intensive acceleration process that is designed to serve faculty members, researchers, postdocs, students at universities, not only in KAUST, but also we serve all universities across the kingdom. So it's a national program. Both of them are national program, 9/10 and Taqaddam, serving universities and entrepreneurs across the kingdom. For example, the previous cohort of Taqaddam, we had 13 universities involved into the program, and we had really high concentrations of biotech-related startups, IoT-related startups, and material-based startups. Most of those startups are IP-based or intellectual property-based, while 9/10 is more like market-driven startup creation we see into it. So we see a good number of content creation startups, e-commerce platforms, and mobile apps, and consumer products generated from this program. So we're keen that to produce to the ecosystem very high quality startups from those programs. The third pillar of our strategic intent is the corporate engagement. So we're driven to get engaged with the corporates in order to promote and foster entrepreneurship within the corporate setup. And we do this in two tracks. So we do open enrollment programs where we bring in 10 different, let's say, teams from different organizations. They're coming in with their business ideas, and then we put them in this trust test process, which is 72 hours, where we tackle the ideas from all these different aspects using the best-in-class methodologies such as lean startup methodologies and design thinking and the business model canvas and so on. And towards the end of the program, they would pitch to a mock-up panel. And this mock-up panel, they would prepare them to pitch to their decision makers or senior management once they go to their corporates. On the other track, so some of those companies, they would come in, they would say, okay, we want to take this even further. So we design bespoke programs for those corporates in order to design custom-made program for a number of teams within the organization to take it further and then deploy those ideas and transform those ideas from being an idea to make it as a product or a service that they can deploy and push into the market. For instance, we're running with Saudi Electricity Company, and we've run 2 different innovation boot camps where we had 20 projects. 13 of them, they were implemented into their power plants, and they are aiming to develop the technology. They want to transform themselves from being a technology consumer to a technology generator, so they can export the technology further. They create spin-outs out of it. And actually next week we're running another innovation boot camp for them as well to take this even further. And we, on average, we run 4 boot camps for SAC. Similarly, we're doing similar stuff with Ministry of Health, and we're working with the government sector as well on that front. And also we work with the private sector, specifically with Abu Dawood, PNG distributor in Saudi Arabia. So the corporate innovation is essential strategic intent in our operation at the Entrepreneurship Center. And those are only examples that we're bringing in. And bridging the gap between the corporate and the startup has been working for us really greatly. I will share with you one story where we ran an innovation challenge. And this innovation challenge was done in partnership with our Department in Facilities and Communities, where they oversee the campus and KAUST community, and also in partnership with the prototyping facility we have at KAUST. And the challenge was like this: okay, look around KAUST, look at the campus, and look at the community, and explore any challenges that you're capable to solve. So one team, and actually they were the winner in the competition, is that they looked at the power meter reader problem. And believe it or not, we're still at the 21st century, but still at the business practice today that we do manual reading for the power meters in your homes. So they were thinking, can't we automate that? So they built rapid prototype. They used a power adapter. They took the engine out, and then they built the circuit board. They connected to the Wi-Fi, plugged in a magnet into it, and then they slammed it onto the power meter, and yet it read the power meter reading. They showed it to the Vice President for Facilities and Communities. They loved it. And then they gave them 25 houses to deploy it for quality check. And then after the check is done, and actually this quality check is over, and now they're rolling out to 3,000 units across campus and KAUST. In the recent visit for the R&D director from the Saudi Electricity Company, where we do have really good relationship with them, we made an introduction to this company. It's called Metroid. And the R&D director, he really loved the idea, he loved the product, he loved the prototype, and he said, okay, you know what, I want to ship to you 1 power meter, and I wanted to build for me a power meter adapter based on their requirements. And actually now they're building the first commercial prototype, and they want to take it further to deploy it for the rest of the power meter readers across the country. So in here we see really a nice synergy that came out of a simple introduction between engagement with the corporates, understanding their challenges, and also engagement with the startups. And this will help to validate, to test the products, and also provide a test bed for the startups to deploy their first industrial pilots, where they can take it further, deploy it, and then move forward to it. So we see the corporate engagement as an essential component of our operation, promoting entrepreneurship and innovation across the kingdom in order to help the startups grow and also help the corporates resolve their problems. Similarly, we have different cases where we get high-tech companies doing quantum dots, and they have really active engagement with SABIC and so on and so forth. But it's so essential that we get engaged with the corporates and the startups, and also building the mindset. And all this makes we blend it all together to create the impact we all aspire to create. Thank you.
Thank you. Cameron?
Well, quite loud. Well, first, I'd love to offer peace and blessings to all of you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here and to be on this panel with you. So thank all of you for that. There is a benefit to going last on this question, is that I got to hear everybody else's answers first. And so to start, I would love to answer or offer some congratulations to some of the answers I've heard. Oftentimes, we find U.S. institutions and institutions around the world really are trying to mimic the rest of us, particularly schools like MIT. And I think what I'm hearing up here is that you're being conscious against not doing that. So certainly congratulations on the 2030 initiative, and certainly even more so on the diversity initiatives. I think those are really compelling. And I think you're quite wise to address the issues of university transformation and, frankly, to explore the technology implications, and what's happening at KAUST. When I look at your ecosystem, and that's really what this is, there is a lot going for you. And so there's a really great opportunity to meet the initiatives stated in the 2030 initiative, or 2030 vision, Some words of caution, however, and take these as you will. I am an economist who studies higher education by training, so this is where those thoughts are coming from. What I see happening a lot of times, and this is across the world, and particularly in the US, so a lesson from us, is that we spend time in higher education and really at large in society trying to mimic the best, who we perceive to be the best institutions. And so at the risk of being slightly controversial, with apologies to MIT over here, I would challenge each of the institutions in the kingdom to not try to be MIT, but rather to be the best institutions they can be. Because there's significant problems with what we call isomorphism, which is really mimicking other institutions. And what typically happens is we see this merging of different business models. And I heard a little bit of that in the discussion about how Saudi institutions need to make some changes. If you start out as an educational institution and you move to become a technology organization and you institute research within your organization, you have to be quite conscious not to meld those two together so succinctly that you're doing one at the expense of the other. And so that leads to another issue here around inefficiencies in allocations of resources. We see in the U.S. significant allocative inefficiencies where we're creating organizations for the sake of creating organizations. And that's both related to this issue of chasing prestige and related to issues of mimicry or trying to be MIT. And so one of the things that we have to realize when it comes to corporate engagement or university business cooperation is that this is really an ecosystem. And defining that ecosystem uniquely for the kingdom is a really important undertaking. You have to understand the wider context of the institutions where they are today. You have to understand and develop the right supporting mechanisms to enable this collaboration to occur. And there's some of those things that we've heard already are already happening. You have to understand what the process is. And more importantly, we often encourage organizations, governments, even industry to really begin with the end in mind. And that means defining what outcomes you're looking for. And so we've heard about an entrepreneurial mindset. That's a very different discussion than creating startups. Creating an entrepreneurial mindset, as we also heard, allows for this sort of process, this thinking process to work itself into industry, and that's really important. It really is beyond just startup activity, right? It's about defining what economic development means for a university. How are you going to invest those resources accordingly? And often in the US, we define economic development as creating new companies because we associate it to jobs. But it's more than that. It's developing physical places. It's making investments in technology. It's building the absorptive capacity of a given region. And then trying to align all of those to labor markets is really a key component of this ecosystem. So all of that to say, from an economist, using economist language, this is really about mobilizing factor endowments. This is about taking the assets that you have here, including all of the people, and giving them the tools that you need to grow the economy substantially and diversify the economy accordingly. And that is the diversity initiatives, it is inclusion initiatives, it's education initiatives, and it's technology and startup activity. So understanding all of that, there are some really key components to the university business collaboration piece once you've defined this ecosystem. And one of those we hear often in the startup ecosystem, and that's the timing piece. You have to be at the right place at the right time for this to happen. And understanding timing between university and industry is an essential component here. But by and large, the most important component, and we see these are scientific data from studies across the EU and across Australia and now across the US, that the number one issue or opportunity for facilitating cooperation between university and business among managers of institutions, academics themselves, and industry partners is the establishment of trust. And so at the very end of the day, this becomes about creating the opportunity to work together and to trust each other and to drive towards the same meaningful outcomes.
Thank you. Let me pick on your comments about what not to do. So let me ask, we start going the other way now. So we're going to start, is what your advice for, if you want to elaborate more, what not to do? Because every time any universities, they want to do entrepreneur, they make a list of things to do. They forget about what not to do. Yeah. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. Am I on yet? I'm back. I go first this time, so good luck, everybody. What not to do, that's a great question. I think I hit on that a little bit. But what you don't want to do is copy everybody else. Don't do entrepreneurship for the sake of doing entrepreneurship. Don't develop a technology transfer office for the sake of trying to chase after the quote-unquote silver bullet and ignore the opportunity to license technologies. When we look at the data from Autumn, 5% of institutions in the US actually make any profit in their operations. So that always brings me to the question of why are you doing this? Why do you have a tech transfer office? And if the answer isn't that we're trying to push the technologies and innovations we've created in the institution out into the economy for the betterment of society and the development of our ecosystem, then we may be doing something wrong. And so what you don't want to do, or what I would discourage anyway, is trying to measure the success of your office by the size of the deals that you've done or the success of any given opportunity. And the data are pretty clear that even in the US, where we're arguably quite good at this, 70% of the successful innovations have come from 15 universities when you measure it by income or revenue. You could argue, however, that we have incredible researchers across the US that are creating really substantial and meaningful technologies that may never make it to market. And so I urge caution around this idea of chasing after the silver bullet or trying to be just like a different university, and really rather encourage this idea of thinking about what are the outcomes you actually want, and begin with that end in mind, and drive the organization and approaches around that.
Thank you.
So I wanted to share maybe two thoughts on the things not to do. First of all is patent collection. And I call it patent collection, defining or measuring the impact that we can create by counting the number of patents we can achieve throughout a certain period of time. And it's not only universities fall into this trap, but also even large corporates. And we had this from some discussion from multinational corporates, where they had one of their technology officers, they had their target to hit this number of patents by the end of the year. But they realized after a while, and that was back in the 80s, but they realized after that, patents are very expensive assets to maintain and file and also commercialize. So they realize after a while they have to drop some of those patents because they really can't maintain it. They have to pay annual fees for it. And patent, it's a legal monopoly for the idea. and it's just identifying or acknowledging the novelty of the idea. But commercializing the patent is a completely different story. And the key thing is that we need to be aware of is that we need to not focus on collecting the number of patents rather than commercializing those patents. And maybe also we need to zoom out a little bit and think about intellectual property, and this is what we do here at KAUS, at the wider spectrum of intellectual property. And what I'm referring to is that it's an inclusive definition of all different aspects of intellectual properties, including know-how, trade secrets, trademarks, copyrights, and patents. And actually, know-how usually arises a lot from universities, because if you think about it as a university, what's your real assets you really do have? Mainly, it's the brilliant minds you have in the institutions. And the goal is that how we can cultivate those intellectual assets and then funnel it into programs or initiatives in order to take it out from the other end as products or services or startups or licensing opportunities and so on and so forth. I wanted to share with you a story on what we have done in some of the classes here at KAUS. So the class we run at KAUS, which is the credit hour classes for KAUS students, we do it in a very experiential learning, and basically we avail intellectual property and convert intellectual properties to the students to inspire them as a starting point for their deployment. And what we do is that we let those students work with it, and then they see how they can take it further. And we use the best-in-class methodology. It's very experiential, it's very hands-on, it's very interactive. And we had one case where the students, they're trying to do the customer discovery, they talk to different clients, and they're working with carbon dioxide capturing material. And the original scientist, or the PI, or the principal investigator, they were having discussion with NASA to deploy it at the spaceships in order to refine the carbon dioxide within those spaceships. But the students, they took a completely different approach. And then they managed to flew in a company in the UK who are in the business of scuba diving material or equipment development. And they wanted to deploy it as the scuba diving material to capture the carbon dioxide for professional divers, and also for the carbon dioxide, the bubbles of water that gets out underwater for scuba divers. If any scuba divers in the room, it's very disturbing for the ecosystem, for the sea ecosystem in life, because it's noisy, it's loud, it's out of their frequency. So that will help the ecosystem to be safer, and also for professional divers, because if they wanted to capture high quality pictures and so on. So it's very key to capture those pictures using those tools. And actually this company, they flew into KAUS, they were in discussion with the TTO office in order to explore licensing opportunity to use the technology for the scuba diving application. And one other case where we had some students, they were inspired by one of the IPs of doing doing a biometric data reading technology. And they got inspired to develop a startup that came out in one of our programs in order to build basically Fitbit for cows. So they do biometric reading devices for the material in order to deploy it and read the health status of the livestock at large livestock's material. And they graduated, and now they're working full time to take this startup even forward. So this is the first thing, is the patent trap that we really wanted to explore. The second maybe not to do or be aware of is that the impact, we realize that we don't really make the impact, rather than the impact is created by the people we deal with, whether they're corporates or startups. So we don't really create the jobs, but we help the startups to create the jobs. And even the corporates, we help them to create spin-outs that can create new opportunities or develop new markets in order to develop the technology and push it even forward. So moving the shift, which is fundamental like mindset you wanted to have, is that the impact is created by the partners, by the players that we deal with, rather than the institution itself. And thank you.
Christopher,
excuse me,
what not to do?
Okay. There is one missing.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'll be brief. it's always great to ask a question about what people should not do. I think that's a fantastic question. So my advice is be careful not to grow too fast, okay? In fact, for a lot of things related to innovation and collaboration and trust, great topic, growth is a big challenge. Now, you might say that is easy for someone to say who comes from one of the most, one of the success stories of universities, but let me give you some statistics about MIT. We have a total of 4,000 undergraduate students, okay? Slightly less, actually. Less than 1,000 per year. We have a total of 6,000 graduate students. That is the entire student body between undergraduates and graduates is less than 10,000. My office is at one end, not of the campus, of the ecosystem around the campus of MIT. I can walk across my part of the ecosystem, the entire campus of the university, and the other side of the ecosystem in 20 minutes. And I do it almost every day. I spend a lot of time walking around, talking to people, and I run into people a lot. We are a very pedestrian university and a very pedestrian ecosystem where there's not a whole lot of people, but it's very dense, and you run into people a lot. Last year, there was a lot of pressure on the Board of Trustees of MIT to grow the size of the student body. Our incoming class was 935 students, and it had been at that level for almost 20 years. And the Board of Trustees met for an entire day and discussed this, and at the end of the day, they made the decision that we would grow the incoming class from 935 students to 975 students. And we will revisit this maybe in another 10 years. So we are acutely conscious that growth is not a substitute for many other very important qualities that we are all striving for in developing our ecosystems.
Thank you. So basically, you don't grow for the sake of growing.
Do not grow for the sake of growth, and recognize that sometimes the growing process can get in the way of some other very important objectives that you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Ahmed?
Yeah, actually, aligned with the filling gap between the university and industry, SWIC came with an idea that to establish diesel park, which is unique. This is the first time a park related to the industry, usually the park related to the university. This park actually located at Al Jubail for an area about 200,000 meters square, with the intake only capacity of 50,000 meter cube per day, which is a plant. Okay, you have to imagine that how big the foundation of this park. Actually, this park intended to have strategic partners, industrial R&D, academic research entities, engineering, leading companies, as well and also Saudi universities, whether local or private. We believe that with this park, all the institutions, companies, leading university, international or national, will be all of them working in this park. That means all the flowers will be in one basket, that they can share and exchange the information between among all of them under SWIC supervision. I believe this park will be a big opportunity for all Saudi universities to fill the gap with specifically with the SWIC, the session industry.
Thank you.
Not to do.
What
not to do. Yeah, okay. Not to do actually. احنا نسمع كثير يعني هنا في السعوديه عن براءات اختراع، وبعض الجامعات حققت 2000 و3000 و4000 براءة اختراع, but we don't use it because no need for it. That يعني هذه المشكله اللي عندنا, انه هي اعتمدنا على الكم ولم نعتمد على الكيفيه ولم نسال سوق العمل ماذا يحتاج. أنا أتوقع أنه قبل أنك المفروض أنك تروح للكامباني والقطاع الخاص وتسأله what's your problem. Then if you understand it well, you can, for example, solve it or fix it ببراءة اختراع معينة. احنا إشكاليتنا أنه يجلس الواحد أحيانا يجتهد واجتهاد فيجد أنه براءة، يعني عنده براءة اختراع، لكن لما تروح للقطاع الخاص زي ما قال الأستاذ الثاني الكوست حقه عالي، غير مجدي اقتصاديا. فنلاحظ أنا يعني حتى أنا من ملاحظتي براءة الاختراع كثير منها غير مجدية فعلا اقتصاديا، يعني أوكي هي تسولف بروبلم بس الكوست حقها جدا عالي، لذلك لا تصبح لها قيمة. وعندنا إحباطات كثيرة حتى نسمع بالإعلام، يعني أنا أذكر بعضهم حتى إذا قابل أحد المسؤولين قال أنتم ما تدعموا براءة اختراع، كذا شخص عنده براءة اختراع لكن الجامعات ما تتبنى البراءة، هم يتوقعوا أن أي براءة يعني الكل فرح فيها، يعني مجرد دعم. الغرب في اليابان وغيره من الدول تسجل عشرات الآلاف لكن ليست لها قيمة. الأمر الآخر أنه لا يعني تسجيلها في السعودية أو معك شهادة أنها غير موجودة في أمريكا ولا في اليابان، يعني هو دائما غالبا يكون التسجيل إقليمي، فقد تكون مكررة يعني في هذا الأمر. ودي أعلق أيضا على نقطة اللي هي مؤسسة تحت المياه لما سألت الدكتور يعني هم العلاقة بينهم والجامعات. الإشكال أن كثير من المؤسسات الآن بما فيها مؤسسة تحت أصبحت لديها معاهد بحثية يعني ريسيرش سنتر، وأصبحوا يعتمدون على أنفسهم أن يعني يستفيدون من أعضاء التدريس في الجامعات، لأن الجامعات في وقت من الأوقات كانت مشغولة أكثر بالجانب التعليمي أكثر من الجانب البحثي، فاضطروا لإنشاء يعني مراكز البحوث. لكن أنا متأكد أن الجامعات يعني إذا استطاعوا إذا improve the research center، متأكد أن بسبب الكوست أو يعني قلة التكاليف راح يكون شراكة حقيقية بين الجامعات وبين المؤسسات سواء مؤسسة القطاع الخاص أو مؤسسة الدولة من أجل خفض التكاليف والاستفادة من معامل الجامعة. طبعا جامعة الملك عبد الله للعلوم والتقنية أنا أقول هذا مثال للجامعات الناجحة لأنها ركزت من البداية على جانب بحثي، ولذلك ليس مستغرب يعني أن يكون عندهم نجاحات وقفزات في هذا الجانب. لذلك أنا أقول يعني فعلا ركز على الكواليتي ليس على الرقم، هو سر نجاح الجامعات في المستقبل.
شكرا. You want to take that?
Yes, sure. So in terms of what not to do, and this is something that I've heard across the panel here today, and I've faced a lot when dealing with private sector and both and the government as well, is I urge you not to make decisions without looking at the data. Please be very careful of that, because what we're finding today, yes, a big issue which I personally believe we are fixing and working on is accessibility to data and having data available for the public and for the private sectors. What we're realizing is a lot of people are walking away or from projects based on they thought that there was no demand, or they thought that the support wasn't there. The relevant support. What we found when talking to entrepreneurs and a lot of people within SMEs is that they said most of the largest problem they're facing today in today's entrepreneurship ecosystem is access to capital, and that there weren't investors interested in supporting them or funding them. Whereas when we actually spoke to VCs, angel investors, incubators, accelerators, they're all heavily interested, and they're actually looking for these entrepreneurs and bright minds to come to them and share their ideas in order for them to support them. So this is just an example of the mismatch that exists today within the market. And I think that applies as well to what was being discussed between universities and private sector. And the availability of the correct education and degrees and programs that supports vice versa. It's because of this lack of visibility on the data and what exists. So, and I'll give you an example that's close to home. When we talk about sports, when we did our survey, our national survey back in 2015, we found that participation within sports is just 13%. However, interest is actually 37%. And it was 37% back in 2015. Had universities known about this interest and level, they would start accommodating programs and degrees to cater to this demand. Had private sector not, they would start looking at innovative solutions and ways, which are things that you mentioned, which I loved and which was music to my ears, that you're looking at innovative solutions within sports. And when we say sports, it's not just the broad definition of a singular sport or a multiple of sports. It's sports, fitness, health, education, well-being, nutrition, and looking at solutions and products within that industry to help make it grow. And I completely agree with you on not mimicking what exists abroad and thinking of everything in terms of our own context and thinking of solutions that apply to Saudis and to the current situation within Saudi Arabia. And a perfect example for that, for entrepreneurship and that, is that we've had entrepreneurs that have come up with abayas for women to practice sports. So they are looking at this framework of how entrepreneurship should be done and how to go about their businesses, but also thinking of it in terms of local content. So that's my 2 cents.
I can't agree with you more. I mean, I was the president of King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, where all the studies should be based on data, and we find out getting these data is so difficult. If you ask 2 entities in the kingdom, like if you ask the customs to give you how many cars are in Saudi Arabia based how much imported, and then if you ask the Ministry of Interior how many cars, and because they give the license, the registration, the difference was almost 50%. So it just tells you like how important is the data, and if you don't have the right data, then you might be making a wrong decision just in perception. So there's definitely. So I'm going to pick up on that. You are one of the youngest in the panel. I think you're younger than Hatan. So, Michael, you are an entrepreneur. So you're not only doing something for the government, you're actually an entrepreneur. You started the health, what they call the empowerment hub. And you also broke some barriers, which is now you are the chairperson of the Women's Fencing Committee. Do you fence, by the way?
I do.
Okay, so just to know, so we don't say something wrong with you. You get in trouble. So tell me, what you are doing differently? Like you mentioned 13%, and I'm very familiar with this data because we just invested in a company. It's a startup company. It's called Get Move.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with them.
We have an MOU with them. Yes.
Okay, great, fantastic. So when we did the market study and due diligence, it was very clear there is a big gap between, as you mentioned, the interest, what people think, and what actually happening, which we find out people sign up for going to the gyms, but a lot of them don't end up going. And then when we look at the gyms, and we find out actually they are very expensive. I paid, when I was in the US, I paid $10 a month for the gym. Here you almost pay $120 a month. So what you're doing differently to really take that 13% in Saudi Arabia, for example, Australia is more than 80% active comparing to Saudi. That's what we're talking about an age 15 plus. Comparing to the countries in the Middle East, like Turkey is about 37%, even Iran is more than 32%. So what's your role? What we need to do differently?
So you touched upon many important subjects and points. Basically, right now, what we're trying to, we have a lot of initiatives in place, whether it's by programs, projects, or even events. And we have 2 key design principles in mind when looking at our initiatives. One, which I mentioned earlier, is diversity and inclusion, and it's this concept of sports for all. So we're not just talking about men or women, we're talking about young, we're talking about the young, we're talking about the elderly, we're talking about people with disabilities, we're talking about everyone and all segments of the society, and to tap into that. And in terms of initiatives that we're actually, and the second design principle we're looking at is realizing and helping people realize opportunity within sports. And opportunity doesn't just lie in participation. Opportunity lies in career paths within sports. It lies in education. It lies in so many different fronts, entrepreneurship, investment. and try to highlight those areas and challenge private sector to come up with innovations to help support the sector. At the end of the day, we're a government entity. We are a supporter, an enabler, a regulator, but it's up to private sector to drive the market forward, and we are a strong believer of that. In terms of the initiatives and specific initiatives we're doing, we have the Mass Participation Federation that's running a multiple of initiatives. In this year alone, we've had 20 activations in over 13 regions in the country with over 56,000 participants to get people moving and to get them understanding what does sports mean. And we're having these activations in public spaces and public areas. So you mentioned something very important, which is unfortunately, gym costs today are extremely high within Saudi Arabia. In fact, on average, they're amongst the highest in the world. And what we're trying to do is, because people believe that just going to the gym is their only option, that's the only form of sport or movement that they can do in order to become active. So what we're saying is we encourage, yes, we're trying to regulate that. We've launched gyms licensing as one of our programs and projects in order to regulate that market a bit more, and both for men and women, not just for women. But we're also trying to encourage people to move in general by opening up our facilities as the General Sports Authority. In Jeddah, we have one of our facilities that opens up once a week, has over 1,000 participants to just get moving, and it's just to get the people familiar and comfortable with the notion of movement. Across the different federations, we're also working with the General Sports Authority on things like Family Sports Day, where they come and portray the different sports that are available, and for people to understand that I can have a future in fencing. I can be a part of archery. I can be a part of esports and e-games. It's not just football or basketball, and that it's a multitude of fronts that they can participate in and be a part of.
Great. I have one more for you.
Please.
When we were doing the due diligence, I wasn't aware of anything in the sport until we see investor. Then you get a chance to see all different kind of aspects. What we find out, there is a lot of studios for women, like there is yoga studios. There is all different, but they are afraid to sign up with this entrepreneur because they are not legally registered. So what is Sport Authority, what you doing to make it easier for these entrepreneurs, they are all women entrepreneurs, to really be easy for them to register their studios without any hassle, without any too much regulation or too much saying you need to be this big, you need to be how many people, or all this stuff.
So within our gyms licensing project, we've taken into account all of these points that you've discussed. It's not just a specific size that they need to confine to or a specific space, or it's just, it takes into account the different types of studios and gyms and facilities that one may operate within that market, and how to adjust for them and the regulations against each one. And this is to sort of help regulate that market and to give people comfort, whether I'm somebody that goes to the gym, that I'm comfortable and I know that this gym is licensed, the instructors here are certified, but also to give visibility to the investors that look at these little studios and see the large potential for growth within that area. Another thing we're doing is we're acting as facilitators, and we're helping these entrepreneurs that have ideas of starting up studios or gyms or even solutions around scuba diving or different sports to come and say, this is a toolkit for entrepreneurs, but tweaked to sports. So with market research and data within the world of sports, as well as licensings and rules and regulations, as well as a map of who's who in the world of funding, whether it's incubators or innovation labs or VCs and vice versa. So this goes as well to educating the funding world and the VCs and the incubators of what the world is like for those entrepreneurs and what the challenges they're facing and what they need to accommodate in order, because we need to understand that the sports sector today in Saudi is still an underdeveloped sector with a lot of untapped opportunity, and we need to bear that in mind moving forward.
going to move to a question. I'm going to start with you, Christopher, this time. Everybody's saying there is a Silicon Valley in the U.S. and there's only one Silicon Valley. Why every state in the United States don't have its own Silicon Valley, considering you have the same laws, the same playground, the same everything? Why is only in Silicon Valley that is everybody goes to? Every entrepreneur thinks the dream is to go there. While, I mean, I know at MIT they have their own hub related mostly to the bioscience and life science, more than into what the people, but in general, why there is no Silicon Valley in every state? Because everybody else want to copy them. I mean, if you go in Saudi, we talk about the Techno Valley, and we talk about Wadi here or Wadi there, and everybody, the image in their mind is they want to be another Silicon Valley, but it's not happening. It's not happening in the US, so why would it happen somewhere else? So you got to give us why.
Well, I think there is incredible innovation that's going on in lots and lots of places, and just because they are not as well known as Silicon Valley, it doesn't mean that they are not just as effective. There are certain things that are very unique about Silicon Valley, historically, about why it developed the way it developed, and sort of combining some of the things that we have said here. I think the trick is we have to learn from others and also be very aware of our unique situation and our unique opportunities and strike the right balance between those. I think that if you went to Austin, Texas, for example, if you go to downtown San Francisco, which is actually distinct from Silicon Valley, if you go to Brooklyn in New York, if you go to Miami, if you go to Atlanta, and just going further afield, if you go to Barcelona, if you go to a suburb of Paris called Plateau de Saclay, if you go to Singapore, you see incredible things going on in incredible ecosystems.
I wanted to add to this. You wanted to add something? Yeah, I wanted to add to this as well, and actually I will use your point earlier on asking universities not to mimic other universities, and I believe similarly for complete ecosystems. As you mentioned, it developed over history, and it just was tagged as Silicon Valley, that was evolved and naturally developed over a very long period of time, 60 or 80 years, starting from the hardware all the way to the software and the applications. So I think it's not, let's say, it's not, excuse me for using the word, it's not really rational to use the cloning concept for such natural evolution of an ecosystem completely. But it has, we have to create our own, and usually our own starts from the strengths we have, and then leveraging those strengths, leveraging those unique factors, and then taking it further into the next level of development. For instance, we're really strong in water desalination. 20% or 18% part of the global water desalination is happening in this country. Yet, we still import the technology. So we're glad that we have really quite good engagement with SWIC in terms of technology development in KAUST and other institutions. But the goal will be, okay, how can we own the water technology in the desalination business? Similarly in oil and gas. And this is what I believe all the different movements now is taking forward to excel and own those technologies and export it to the world rather than consume it from externally.
Okay, we're active. So a couple of really interesting things, I think, if I can piece all of the comments together here, including sport, is really we're talking a lot about scaling or scale, of the things that are happening within the ecosystem. And that means, how do you scale sport to be about health? How do you scale sport to be beyond just the athletics piece of it and integrate into design and place? And there are lessons to be learned there, right? So this is about smart scaling. It's about smart scaling of education towards outcomes, defined outcomes. It's about smart scaling towards understanding where you should make the investments in the economy, and recognizing, again, smart scaling towards what you should mimic as well. And I've picked on MIT a little bit here, but there's a lot of great lessons to be learned from MIT. Chris's point about not trying to grow too fast, that's their effort to scale at the appropriate pace. His point about the walkability of campus, that's their scalability and how that institution scales. Other institutions in the US, like Arizona State University, are scaling exponentially. They went from having 40,000 students to 120,000 students. So, but they're purposeful about why they're doing it, and so they're being smart about their scale. And I think you made an excellent point here around exporting your technologies, and certainly an excellent point about industry understanding that there are a whole bunch of places to go find technology. And we find that a lot on the intellectual property side, is that the uptake mechanisms on the industry side aren't big enough, and they have a tendency to go to the most prestigious universities to look for in-licensing opportunities and ignore other institutions that may have specific expertise to enable their growth and scale. And so to your question, really to the point of your question around why isn't there a Silicon Valley everywhere in the US, I think it's actually quite smart that there isn't a Silicon Valley everywhere, because what we are seeing is that places like Boston have looked at what is unique about Boston, and they're making the right investments there. Places like Philadelphia, which is built on the medical sector and the educational sector. It's a robust economy in Philadelphia, but we only talk about Silicon Valley because of its startup ecosystem, not about its more comprehensive ecosystem. And looking more broadly and analyzing other ecosystems to pick what's right to enable the growth and scale that needs to happen here is really a wise move. I mean, Chris brought up a whole bunch of different places. I would add to that list London. London is incredible, and it's the place for fintech in the world. So you can't ignore and just look at Silicon Valley.
I have a question. We heard today about the techno valleys, the Wadi Mecca, Wadi Jeddah cows, and there is a trend that when you do this Wadi or techno, you need to have companies there. Like in Techno Valley in Dhahran, you have Halliburton, you have Siemens, you have Honeywell, and others in cows. They're trying to have Dow Chemical and other entities. The question I have, is that the right thing? Is that how you build an ecosystem, by having big companies in the middle of entrepreneurs? The reason I'm asking that question, if we talk the analogy of what's his name, Victor Wang, on his book The Rainforest, where he compared plantation and rainforest, and why, if you have a plantation, it's very hard to have. If you look at the plantation where you grow corns, you grow cotton, then you need to have it fenced, you need to have it protected. If there is any weeds are growing, you need to take it out because it's going to kill your plantation. However, in rainforests, the whole rainforest is weeds. And one day a scientist would come and find this weed and turn it into a huge business. So some people are looking at having companies in the techno valleys where actually is intended for entrepreneurs. It will kill the entrepreneurs rather than help them, because they become like weeds. They're just distracting them. What do you think? You want to take it?
Yeah, let me take that really quickly. Because I think I want to go back to this ecosystem idea that we've all sort of touched on here. Have you heard of the triple helix theory, which is it's really what's, I think in many ways what might be happening here in the kingdom, and certainly is an outcropping of theory that has come from Silicon Valley, to take it back to that, but it's this idea that we're making a shift away from government-driven interactions that sometimes force business and university to work together and sometimes not, to this picture of Venn diagram, a series of interlocking circles where you have university, industry, to your question, and government all actively responsible in equal ways to the growth of a given economic ecosystem. And one of the things that seems to happen there, though, in that space, two things that seem to happen. One of the problems with research in this space is that first we have a tendency to only look at the entrepreneurship piece of this. And that's academics' fault. That's our fault from a researching standpoint. But the other is that we forget that there are multiple levels of a triple helix, or this ecosystem. So there are businesses and industry players, government players, and university players that are at your local level. There are university, industry, and government players at a national level. They're at the regional level, they're at an international level, and they're sometimes the same and sometimes different. But you need all of them. And my biased perspective is that the one constant in all of those are your universities, because they have a responsibility at each of those levels, whereas a big government, or a big industry player may not, a big company may not. So the short answer to your question is yes, you need them, but you need the small ones too, and you need the medium ones too, and you need the university as well, and you need the government interaction, and you need them all equally at all levels of the ecosystem.
I wanted to add to this, which is okay. So if you look at the techno valleys at different points or different parts of the country. Let's take, for example, let's say the eastern region. So what we'll see basically is R&D centers for those institutions, whether it's SIPCM or SABIC or others, which is basically, it's a closed door, highly secured building, conducting high impact, high cost research in order to develop products that they can introduce to the market and then compete with those products into the market. So we're building those closed circuits that there is minimal interaction between those circuits within the Wadi. And of course you will see some kind of entrepreneurial activities in the hubs that it's there, that is incubating all the startup activities into it. But I think this is what we need to take this even further, one step down the line, which is basically bring in a creative collision concept or physical areas to enable interaction between those entities. And I wanted to reflect what's happening on the innovation districts that is happening in different places in the world, where the big companies, for example, Pfizer, in Boston, they're building great innovation district in there, where even the big companies, Pfizer's one of them, they have their own R&D centers, which is fine, closed, highly secured area. But also they build some smaller R&D centers, and the main goal is that to tap into the resources and enable the creative collisions to run into different students and leverage the walk-in proximity to enable this creative collision that can enable innovative products or engagement and so on. And this model has not been implemented only in Boston, but also been replicated in Barcelona 22 and many others as well. And it's been working really greatly. So in the techno valleys, maybe engagement, and even in the metropolitan areas, it's really important to have this innovation districts or areas where it's a main hub, it's a go-to place. If you wanted to meet entrepreneurs, inventors, investors, and you name it, you go to that hub and then you would meet people, you might run into it where the environment would be completely different and the people will have completely different mindset to enable this creative collision to take it even further to the next level and empower the innovation aspects or edge to it and create this buzz and then let the nature take its place in terms of the development of the technologies coming up.
Yeah, Christopher.
Well, to me, first of all, this is a great panel. All the comments from the panel are fantastic. The key thing about the ecosystem to me is that it works because there's so many different components that work together. And I just wanted to echo a comment about paying attention to the local as opposed to just the national level institutions. You know, what is the town that you are building the ecosystem in? What type of town is it? What is the society there? What is the economy? You're part of a place where you want people to want to live, raise families, where their spouses can get jobs, where their children can go to the kind of schools they want. You have to pay attention to those details because those are very important in creating an ecosystem. You asked a very specific question about attracting companies to ecosystems. Companies are attracted to places where they can hire really good quality employees is one thing. So companies are attracted to places where there will be the kind of people that they want to hire. They're attracted to places where they can do business. They're attracted to places where they feel welcome. And so I think at the end of the day, you have to look at the level of individuals, not just broad institutions. Is this a place that's going to be attractive, that's going to draw people in? It was very interesting to me. I was in Silicon Valley very recently. I go there a lot, actually. And it's interesting that the companies in Silicon Valley, the big companies, have acquired their own buses. And they run those buses between San Francisco and Silicon Valley, which is about 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers, because they found that a lot of their employees like to live in San Francisco. They want that urban environment. They want access to inexpensive health and expensive exercise, sport facilities, theater, music. They want to live in an urban environment. And it's interesting to me how that has caused companies in Silicon Valley to accommodate the wish of their employees to live, many of their employees, to live in San Francisco and still work in Silicon Valley. Those are the kinds of details that are essential if you are trying to promote the growth of an ecosystem and bring all these players together.
Okay, my last question for the panel. The Saudi government has injected billions of riyals in the recent 6 months they announced to stimulate the entrepreneurship ecosystem in the country. And they introduced a new regulations, they deleting old regulations to ease the business for entrepreneurs to conduct business. So the question is how entrepreneurs can contribute to your strategy?
So when you look at the sports sector across the world, SMEs contribute around 80% in general. So when we're saying we're working on the sports sector, a key element to that is entrepreneurship and these SMEs. Therefore, a lot of, yes, money has been injected into that, but what we're saying now is we're gonna have a bunch of initiatives where it's not just we're giving them the tools they need, the business plan competitions and different initiatives we're gonna provide. What we're saying is there are issues today within the ecosystem, as mentioned across the panel, but it's normal. We're starting this new phase where we're focusing and we're diversing away from oil and we're focusing onto all these different sectors. And so I would like to actually challenge the private sector and entrepreneurs specifically to be innovative and to be creative and not to fear that innovation or creation, not to feel like there's anything that's holding them back today. If they feel like there are specific areas that are holding them back today, to come and talk to the rightful entities within government to help support them, whether if it's from a regulation perspective or facilitation. we're trying our best to reach out to private sector and to SMEs to understand what are these issues that they're facing and help support them. But in return, we would like them to come up with ideas and solutions to contribute to the issues which they are highlighting and facing. Like I said, this is the sector that should be driven by the private sector with the support of the government.
So do you think the government would have rules for universities that they have to have a sport as part of their program?
I can't speak that the government will have rules or not, but what I'm saying is we have signed, as one government entity, we have signed MOUs with 14 universities in order to encourage multiple things, like one, the different majors that can come out of sports, also sponsoring different sporting majors across the board, as well as using their facilities and opening them up to their students, and encouraging competitions, and not just from an actual physical participation point, but also from an entrepreneurship and business perspective with the researches and resources they have as universities.
Thank you. Mohammed, I know Majma University is new, but how the entrepreneurs can help you at Majma University to achieve this strategy? I know recently you have some kind of entrepreneurship conference as well, right?
Yeah, we will support sport. First of all, in our strategy in the university, we plan to improve the research centers. We have actually 4 research centers in Majma University, and we encourage all of them to have conference every year, and in a special area. We would like to focus especially the problem we have in the region, because Majma University has different from another university. We focus more on the medical issue. That's the main thing we focus on. Actually, the last year we have 2 conferences in the medical about some sickness because we have some villages who are far away from our university, so we have some disease in this part, and we try to focus in this disease. And we have for the last our strategy will be in 220 will be the end, and we try to sometimes mix some departments because as to start the university, it was from different college, from different university. When we start, some from the part of Saudi, King Saud University, the other part from Qasim University. So we try to reorganize this college to be in the one college, and that's in general.
Okay. We have made considerable strides in removing the obstacles for the entrepreneur in the country, but there is still work to be done in terms of regulations and procedures. Entrepreneurs are jobs creators, as we know. Instead of seeking employment, or they create it by meeting particular need locally. SWEC now actually, within our Desal Park, that is going to be launched within the beginning of 2019. We will have entrepreneur hub. That will be incubators, accelerators, and everything. I believe now also I believe that the woman will play a major role in this, especially in our hub. Also, the entrepreneur will localize, and job creation will be the main ways for entrepreneur, will help them to achieve the vision for 2030.
Sure. And you're achieving your strategy.
Well, I just wanted to add one comment to this question, which has not been talked about yet in this panel, which is that universities are competing with each other. And one of the things that universities compete with each other on is attracting the best possible students. There's a reason why many universities invest in sports facilities, for example, not just to have competitive sports teams, which is pretty uniquely American, but everywhere. This is a very important part of the lifestyle of young people, especially energetic young people. It's not just a health aspect, it's a social aspect. And so I just wanted to connect that as an example of one of the important issues for universities is to examine the universities around them and ask themselves, how can I make my university as appealing as possible for the types of students that I would like to have come to my university? And I think that's a factor to be considered.
So for us at the Entrepreneurship Center in KAUST, we think about entrepreneurship and innovation as a team sport. And we believe this is more like a co-opetition rather than a competition. So it's so essential that we get this all together collectively as an ecosystem. Engagement with the corporates or engagement with the startups, the synergies between them is just going to push the needle. It's going to move the engine forward to create this momentum to push the technology forward and achieve the impact that we all create. Yes, so the main focus is the startups, the corporates, the ideas, the teams who are building it, and try to avail all the resources, capabilities, and network to make it happen, and then achieve those targets. And we always even communicate to our startups and our partners as corporates that our success is mutual. And usually success is better, tastes better when it's shared. So we believe that this is really collective and holistic, and we have to get all together to achieve the 2030 vision, to achieve the targets that we look forward to have, to hit the KPIs we set ahead of ourselves. And نشتغل مع شركة اسمها UBI Global. And UBI Global is a Swedish-based organization that oversees benchmarking activities for 400 different incubators around the globe. And basically we subscribe to their model in order to benchmark our performance against other players across 7 different continents. And what we do for UBI, they have a wide range of different KPIs. We collect around 55 KPIs throughout the operations that we run. من الجobs, the capital, the revenues on a regular basis, and having this close relationship with the startups to collect and update the data. And I'm glad you mentioned the question, because in this business we're dealing with very volatile data, and it's really hard to measure the impact. So it's very important that we collect the data on a regular basis so we can subscribe to those services and measure our performance across other players into the market. In February, we attended the UBI Global Summit in Toronto, Canada, and we were acknowledged as a top performer. And it's a really good starting point to look at other players and what they're looking at. They publish annual reports as well on best practices and what's happening at different parts of the world. So I would highly recommend other universities to subscribe and get engaged, at least to look at what's happening. And then we can get the collective impact, the other institutions, and bridge maybe the silos that Khalil you were mentioning, by having not having good connectivity between the different institutions, but hopefully the KPIs will kind of illustrate the collective impact that all different efforts taking place across different universities.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can take maybe one question. We're just running out of time. So
thank you for such Thank you for such a great session. Ali Al-Jabran, I just established a startup in using artificial intelligence. Princess Haifa, mashallah, mentioned for the entrepreneurs to be more creative and to take risk. So we have a couple disruptive business models on the table. But when I go to the Minister of Commerce and I told them about the business we're intending to do, it's a disruptive business model. The laws doesn't know how to control it. There is no law for such thing. So who should we deal with? Because when we explain the idea, they go, we don't know under what category this belongs. So this is the first question. The second question is, for the 2030 vision and empowering the women, etc. In our team, we have talents of both gender. And to have a lean startup, before spending any penny, we make sure that this was the right investment. At a very early stage, we need a place to work with, and I'm trying to find the Saudi garage that doesn't conflict with the culture. Here we say this is the bachelor section, this is the family section, etc. So I was thinking, well, maybe public libraries can be a suitable Saudi garage that doesn't conflict with the culture. But they don't allow us to sit at the same table. Okay. I mean, King Fahad Library, they allow both gender on the same floor, but not at the same table. So yeah, this is my two questions, and any of you can help. Okay. Thanks.
It's Prince Haifa.
So yes, I agree with you that most of the, again, because like we mentioned before, these are new industries, a new concept, and you mentioned it very well, that it's disruptive innovation. And you need to raise these issues correctly, which I think you mentioned you've done, and to the right government entities. So maybe going to the Ministry of Commerce or even to the different programs that are offered through SMEA and having that discussion with them to see what they can provide to support you within those innovations and services. But I think also to go to the rightful entity in terms of what is that business and go to the rightful place. So whether it's a specific university that can support you on that, a government university, whether it's one of those centers that were mentioned by my colleagues on the panel, and go to see whether it's a science-driven or whether it's a technology-driven, and go to the right entities that are supporting those sort of initiatives. That's on that comment. Whether on the second comment of the working spaces, based on the discussions we've had with incubators and accelerators, they do provide working spaces for both men and women to work in one entity. So it's the business that takes the entity, the room, and is provided with a space to work together and come up with a business. And I think the centers that they have mentioned here as well, and innovation labs, do offer the same. I'm not going to speak on your behalf. I'm going to let you speak for your centers and your accelerators to give him a more live example.
Sure. Okay, as you know, in KAUST we're a co-ed institution, and so we tackle this problem properly. So it's part of the culture that we're building, and it's interesting the synergy that and complementary, let's say, minds that work as teams. And what makes really a strong team is a diversity and a different backgrounds into it. So we're a big fan and supporters for the engagement of different stakeholders at different fronts. And we're trying to work as well. Once we're working with 9/10, for example, we have a co-working space that is co-ed as well, or a co-working space that allows both genders in. Then we'll be working with teams and so on. So it's essential. It's complementary forces that you wanted to bring in together in order to create the impact we wish to create.
Okay, I think we're coming to an end to this. It's just one comment to the person who asked the question. If you are an entrepreneur, the first place that you don't go is to the government office. You go to somebody else to help you with your business, and then somebody else will help you with the government office. Anyway, so
not really. So government will help support, and this is what we're saying within the world of sports. We're facilitating by coming to us, raising the issue. If it's a licensing or regulations issue within the world of sports, we will work with the government entities to help provide that. And if it's a matter of putting you with the right people within your ecosystem, we will also facilitate for that.
Okay, let me correct myself. When I said that, that's what I meant, because we receive all kinds of problems from entrepreneurs. So we basically put it together and we tell them, don't bother yourself going there, we'll do it for you. So we take all these issues of our entrepreneurs and we define all the pain in the process, and we go to the SME authority, which we did, and actually that's where resulted in changing a lot of the rules and the new regulations. It just needs to be more structured, because you cannot just everybody goes by himself with one specific problem, rather than you have a collection of issues that you can solve it in one shot. Okay, I mean, we're coming to an end. There is one lady has been raising her hand for a very long time, so you'll be the last one, so please go ahead.
أشكرك.
Ask a question.
أوكي، أشكرك. أنا رانيا سفر، العلاقات العامة والمسؤولية الاجتماعية شركة سامرف مصفات أرامكو إكسون موبيل ينبع. طبعا بالنسبة للاتجاهات الحديثة والتعاون ما بين القطاع الخاص لتحقيق رؤية 2030 في ريادة الأعمال، أنا كشركة بأدعم أو يعني عندي مجال في المسؤولية الاجتماعية، عندي أحيانا تردد أو تخوف إني أنا أدعم في مجال ريادة الأعمال، وذلك لأنه ألاقي فيه مشاريع متعثرة طول المشروع، يعني أي مشروع لا يقل عن 2 أو 3 سنين، هذا لا يقل ما كان 5 سنين عشان يبان إذا كان المشروع ده ناجح أو لا. فإيش الشيء المحفز لي أنا كقطاع خاص عشان أدعم ريادة الأعمال؟ شايفة أنا كثير دحين من معاهد ريادة الأعمال طالعة يعني، وهذا شيء جدا جميل، لكن النتيجة طويلة وبعيدة ويعني غير ناجحة 100%. إيش اللي محفز لي؟ شكرا.
So I don't know if they translate, but the question is saying you are an investor, right? تستثمرين انت.
Samref.
What?
She's from Samref.
Oh, from Samref. Okay, so the question is they want to invest in startup companies, but they want to be be sure the startup company is going to work out, because it takes a long time for them to figure it out, like 2 or 3 years.
Yes, I'm a private executor, but يعني أنا قطاع خاص بس إنه كبير، ما إنه قطاع خاص عادي يعني زي أرامكو أو إكسون موبيل زي كده.
They will invest or purchase.
Okay, go ahead.
I understood it as بتشتروا ولا بتستثمروا؟
لا، أنا مسؤولية اجتماعية مسؤولية اجتماعية في شركة سامرف، فأنا بدعم مشاريع لخدمة المجتمع من ضمنها ريادة الأعمال، لكن يعني بأجلها كل مرة لأنه يعني دعم طويل المدى وما في نسبة نجاح عندي 100%، اللي يعني ما بتديني فيدباك ريتيرن اون انفستمنت، يعني ما في شيء بيوصلني، يعني تلاقي من بين 10 مشاريع تلاقي يمكن واحد مشروع يعني ممكن إنه ينجح.
خليل, you want to take this or you want it to?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quick.
So I think lunch is.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. I can start with this, بعدين نصير نقدر نتكلم بعد الجلسة. طيب. اوكي، جزاك الله خير. مرة كويس انكم بتحاولوا تشتروا او تستثمروا وتتعاملوا مع الشركات الناشئة، لكن جزء كبير من نجاحها
أنا يعني مع معاهد ريادة الأعمال، أنا كشركة أتعاون مع معاهد ريادة الأعمال يعني دعم، لكن ماني قادرة لأنه يعني ما في شيء واضح بالنسبة لي.
طيب ممكن بس أعيد السؤال عشان أتأكد أنه فهمتك مضبوط. أنت بتحاول تشتري من عندك، أنت شغالة في السياسة حق سامرف وبحاول تشتري في أو تدعمي من شركات ناشئة.
أدعم معاهد ريادة الأعمال في لتطوير أو في مجال ريادة الأعمال، إنهم هم يدعموا الشباب. دوري أنا دعم معاهد ريادة الأعمال، يعني معاهد ريادة الأعمال.
طيب إيش السؤال؟
إيش اللي يحفزني؟ ليش أدعمهم؟ إيش اللي يحفزني إذا كانت المشاريع مو كلها ناجحة؟ اللي بيدعموها هم أو اللي بيدربوا الشباب عليها.
Okay, أنا آسف إن we run out of time، بس حتى he promised يعني راح يكلمك بعد البانل، and أعتقد he's the right and appreciate
إذن شكرا لكم على هذه الجلسة. والآن يتفضل الدكتور إبراهيم بن محمد الحركان المشرف العام على معهد ريادة الأعمال بجامعة الملك سعود بتكريم المشاركين في هذا الحفل، وسيكرم صاحبة السمو الأميرة هيفاء بنت محمد آل سعود مدير عام الاقتصاد الرياضي في الهيئة العامة للرياضة. سعادة الدكتور محمد الشايع وكيل الجامعة للدراسات العليا والبحث العلمي بجامعة المجمعة. سعادة الدكتور أحمد بن صالح العمودي رئيس معهد الأبحاث وتقنيات التحلية في المؤسسة العامة لتحلية المياه المالحة. كريستوفر نوبل مدير المشاركة المؤسسية ومبادرة حلول البيئة. الأستاذ هتان أحمد رئيس مركز ريادة الأعمال جامعة الملك عبد الله للعلوم والتقنية. كاميرون ماكوي نائب الرئيس المشاركة الاقتصادية في جامعة لهاي. إذن على مدى 3 أيام متواصلة استمعتم لنا واستمعنا لكم. طرحنا أوراق عمل لأكثر من 40 ورقة عمل بحثنا من خلالها إلى تقديم كل ما هو جديد في ريادة الأعمال. اليوم نختتم ملتقى ريادة الأعمال في نسخته الثانية، ونحن على أمل أن نلتقي بكم في العام المقبل بإذن الله في النسخة الثالثة. وقد حققنا الكثير من الإنجازات، وقد حققتم أنتم الكثير من طموحاتكم لنرتقي سويا ونكون كما بدأنا، نكون من الحالمين والطامحين بإذن الله لهذا الوطن العزيز الغالي. شكرا لكم وشكرا لحضوركم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نرحب بالحضور جميعا. فيوجد مسابقة لأفضل مشروع، 3 أفضل مشاريع ريادية تحت رعاية معهد ريادة الأعمال جامعة الملك سعود. تبدأ عرض البرزنتيشن أو المشاريع خلال 5 دقائق. اللي حاب يتفضل أهلا وسهلا. في عندنا لجنة محكمين موجودين. 5 دقائق وتبدأ عروض المشاريع. شكرا لكم.
الحين انا سمعت معلومه قبل تقول ان ندفع وخسرانه والحين دفعنا بزياده. هذا الحكي لا لا يقول لك الصلاة لا 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 لا
ما يعرف وش الموضوع. الله يسلمك.
انا على عجال، انا عبد الله قطان مجله رواد الاعمال من الشرق الاوسط السعوديه. فودنا عاد نحظى في الشاشه تكونين المصدر الهام لكل المشاهدين وتعلمون بشكل كبير. متى ودك بس انت تكلمتي عن الداتا تحتاجون الداتا. احنا بارشل هي الاحصاء هو يصير داتا.
Okay. احنا we're working with the international. We have a yes. We're working with them.
انا والميكا كاتب بس انا مفكر سواء اروح هنا وهنا. كنت عندي في فتره اللي هي توقيت الوظائف. ايوه زرنا السينت في الرياض.
ايوه يس
اشتغلنا على حساب الوظائف من المبادرات الحكوميه. والان كنا نشتغل في الاحصاء. نشتغل على والمعهد اصلا في مشاريع الدكتور خالد النعمي انا في الانتربرنور سنتر.
اوكي يعطيك العافيه. والله
حتى اذا تحتاجون مؤشر القوه خلال السنه والله حتى الاستثمار والمشكله ونطلب للساحين بعدين نعطيكم ريبورت. والله
لانه في صوت وصوره له اداه. ما هو ايه، لا فيه شيء غريب لانه طالع. طيب لحظه بس بتصل بالفني.
اي شوف لنا احمد ولا احمد.
بسم الله.
ना लगा दिया वो सामने दो चाहिए मेरे को
वो नीचे टेबल
दो चाहिए बस ये लेके आया नीचे से
मेरे भाई वो नीचे जो टेबल पड़े हैं ना उन पे भी पानी बोलते चेंज करो
أنا
इसको पूरा है पानी
أنا بجيب متطوعين عشان أنا بنزل الدرجات.
لازم يجوا خلاص يجلسوا دكتور.
المشكلة ايه؟ المشكلة في ايه؟ ايوه كيف اسمع الصوت؟ ايش؟ طيب في ما في صوت.
بسم الله.
هاي الفيديو وكله حيعرضوه
جايبين البنات مجهزين.